Hi everybody, this is Rob Hopkins here from Transition Network from Transition Town Totnes, and I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in person today. I have another commitment somewhere else and so I can't make it. But I hope this little 10-minute contribution to your event using this format will be a useful contribution. I do this kind of thing quite a lot. I gave up flying in 2006, so I do a lot of presentations sitting here in Totnes, sending out talks. Sometimes I feel a bit like Osama bin Laden sitting in a cave somewhere sending out these kind of video messages, but it does mean that I spend a lot less time traveling about on airplanes. And but I'm really honoured to have been asked to contribute something to your really important conversations today. I think the conversations you're having today about the climate emergency and what we should do about it are really the most important conversation we can be having at all at this point. And I guess just a little reminder, a little bit of what Extinction Rebellion might call tell the truth would be, as by way of context. You know, we know that if we carry on with business as usual, we will pass 1.5 degrees in about 5 years. We'll pass 2 degrees in about 10 years, and we'll reach 4 to 6 degrees by about 2070. But we know that between 1.5 and 2 degrees, we will see global crop failures. We know that by 4 degrees, billions of people will be unable to survive on this planet. And by 6 degrees, that's kind of it, really. So we're on a trajectory which is really a kind of a suicide path. So the conversation that is the most important conversation to have right now, I think, is what do we do about this? What if in everything that we did, we actually acted as though this were a climate emergency? Not that we acted as though someone's going to invent a silver bullet and come along and solve it out. Not that we act as though, oh, you know, we can just rely on government to do this. You know, what if in everything that we did as individuals, as organizations, as local governments, we acted absolutely as though this is a climate emergency and as though we have to put everything possible into staying below 1.5 degrees. And that is a huge ask. That requires a reduction in emissions of between 10 to 11% every year, starting right now, and that has never been done before. And the thing that I would like to bring and contribute to your conference is the idea that that is fundamentally a work of the imagination, a project of the imagination. As Naomi Klein, who writes books about climate change and who's brilliant, says, there are no non-radical solutions left. The only solutions left now are the really bold, imaginative solutions. In Dunkirk, in France, they're making all the public transport completely free and finding that actually it means loads of people are saying, I don't really need a car anymore, actually. And they're able to move towards a city centre where people can breathe and there's more space. In a city called Montsartou in France that I visited recently, which is north of Nice, the French government recently made a law which said that all schools had to serve 20% organic food, and in Montsartou they said, well, if 20% is better than 0%, why are we stopping at 20%? Let's just do 100%. So 100% of all the food in the schools is organic, and they found that it had a real knock-on thing for many of the families. 60% of parents who'd never bought organic before started buying organic food for their kids. But the really exciting bit for me was they also created a market garden on the edge of the city where they grow 70% of the food for all the schools. For me, that is a win-win, win-win, win-win solution to climate change. It's good for public health, mental health, biodiversity, local job creation, the local economy. It's a great educational resource for kids, and so on and so on and so on. And so many of the solutions that you'll be thinking about during your conference are like that. You know, we could be looking at really looking at the things that we need to do for climate change, firstly as being things we need to do anyway because we need to survive, but actually also they're better for mental health within our community because it's about bringing people closer together, giving people meaningful things to do, ending this kind of disconnected age of loneliness society that we live in now. It's good for public health because people are living in cleaner air, have more access to green space, to food and so on. So I've been part for the last few years of the transition movement, and it's wonderful to see Transition Town Worthing as part of this event, and there are many transition groups in Hastings and other places there along the coast doing some really great projects. And their whole philosophy, their whole approach is, if we wait for governments it'll be too late. If we try to act ourselves, it'll be too little. But maybe if we get together with the people around us, the communities, our neighbours, the communities and businesses around where we live, it might just be enough, and it might just be in time. And so transition is a very kind of sleeves rolled up, practical, optimistic, positive movement that says, actually, now is the time for us to work together in a way that's really playful and kind of creative and imaginative. Here in Totnes, we've been doing transition since 2005, 2006. It's led to over 50 different projects, some of which are still active, some of which have kind of done their thing, and you know, people are doing other things. You know, we have planted more than 400 fruit and nut trees in kind of unloved public places throughout the town. People can now go and fill a bag of almonds. We called that Project Totnes the nut tree capital of Britain. And because I like the idea of Britain having a nut tree capital, and as far as I'm aware, no one else has yet challenged us for that title, so we still are the nut tree capital of Britain. So Worthing and AD, you're very welcome to challenge us on that one. We have an incredible edible project growing food around through our neighbourhood. We have a great project called Food in Community that collects surplus vegetables that are going to be thrown away from Riverford Farm on the edge of town, brings them into town, distributes them among people who are in food need and organisations too, and then runs events for people to teach people how to cook, and does a whole load of really amazing things using that food. We have a project called Transition Homes, where the Transition Group is becoming a housing developer and is going to build 29 or 30 houses for local need, which will be kept in community ownership, built using local materials as a training opportunity. We have a community-owned energy company. You know, how do we start as communities to take more control over our future and play a bigger role in shaping what that low carbon future would actually look like in such a way that communities are the people who drive it? I'm one of the people who started a brewery here called the New Line Brewery. We just became one of the first 100% community-owned breweries. We now have 270 owners. For me, when we start to look at climate change and the possibility of this, that when we decide to be the change, that we're not going to wait for permission anymore, all kinds of beautiful ideas and possibilities are unlocked, and the kind of change that we can do because we're from a place and we know it and we understand it and we know the people. In Black Isle in Scotland, Transition Black Isle ran a project called the Million Miles Project to try and reduce the amount of car use from that peninsula by 1 million miles. In the end, they reduced it by 1.2 million miles, which is the equivalent of driving to the moon and back 2.5 times, which they could do because they knew that place and its limits and its challenges and its community. In Crystal Palace, Transition Crystal Palace have started some things like a library of things, which has been hugely successful, so people don't need to buy electrical equipment. They become a member and they rent out through a very impressive system how they borrow those things and take them home. And their food market they started, which has won every award in London for the best food market, the Crystal Palace Food Market. When I went and visited them and I said, "Why do you do this?" They said, "We do this because we want our children to grow up thinking this is normal." And for me, that's what this is all about. How do we take the idea of a low carbon future and make it normal? Because fundamentally, if at the moment we're up here, we're using this huge amount of carbon emissions, we urgently need in the next 15, 20 years to get down to here where we're using very, very little. The only way that's going to happen is if now, here, we can bring that future to life. We can tell stories about a low carbon future that is so delicious that they create such a deep, deep longing in people that that's the only thing that will do. That's the future we're going to. Remember when Neil Armstrong went to the moon and was the first person to set foot on the moon? We'd already been to the moon hundreds of times before. Frank Sinatra had been to the moon. Tintin had been to the moon. We'd been to the moon hundreds of times in films and stories and songs. And so we created such an intense longing to go to the moon that when we went to the moon, when Neil Armstrong got there, we'd already been there hundreds and hundreds of times. And that's what I would really hope for your conference. How does your conference today and the stories that you tell about the future that it is still entirely possible that we could create is able in the people at the conference and in the people of Worthing and in the people of Ada, that deep, deep longing for a future where we are more connected, more involved, where the food is better, the beer is better, the conversation is better, the conviviality is better. Let's create that deep longing and tell the stories about a future where we made it, where people will look back on this time now, at the time of the climate emergency, as a time where people stepped up with courage and imagination and integrity and passion and made a change happen that when people started out felt completely impossible. But by the end, people looked back and said, wow, we did that. You did that. And today is the day when all of that starts. So I wish you absolutely the best with your conference, and I really look forward to hearing the stories as all of the results begin to unfurl. Power to the imagination. Thank you very much.